Joining us now from Beijing, we're joined by Victor Gao. He is the director of the China National Association of International Studies. Also joining us from London is Keyu Jin. She is a lecturer in economics at the London School of Economics. And with us from Hong Kong is Tim Summers. He is a former British diplomat and is now a senior consulting fellow with the Asia program at Chatham House. Welcome to all of you to the show. Victor, let me start with you.
Thank you.
President Xi's visit to the United Kingdom is being hailed as a golden era, a golden age in UK-Chinese relations. How do you assess it?
Definitely. I think President Xi Jinping's state visit to the United Kingdom, which is the first state visit by a Chinese head of state in 10 years, is truly becoming an unprecedented landmark and groundbreaking state visit. And China and the United Kingdom have dwelt with each other as equals, have treated each other with full respect, and have promoted bilateral trade, business, financial cooperation to the fullest extent. And as a result, both countries and people in both Britain and China hugely benefit. This is truly becoming a good example of major power bilateral relations, and it has implications not only for China and UK, but also for similar relations like China and the United States, which can learn a lot in a profound manner from the excellent, good relations between China and UK, which now is entering a truly golden era.
Keyu, in her comments at the state dinner for President Xi, Queen Elizabeth said the relationship between the United Kingdom and China, and I'm quoting here, was a truly global partnership, and she called it a defining moment right now for bilateral relations. Why is Britain attaching so much importance to this visit?
Well, I think President Xi is here to talk about cooperation. And from an economic perspective, there is significant scope for economic cooperation. And the reason is that the next biggest economic trend in China is financial liberalization. And London is in the international financial center. It could provide financial services. The RMB offshore center market is already very dynamic in London. And I think the UK, in order to preserve its preeminence as an international global financial center, would benefit hugely from China's gradual financial liberalization. The second point is that from a perspective of foreign policy, it is really marking a shift in paradigm, in my view, which is that it is diversifying away from strong relationships with its traditional partners, the US and Europe, and forging stronger bonds elsewhere in the world. And I think that is extremely interesting.
Right, Tim, what are the main benefits for China in developing this relationship with the United Kingdom? Is it just economic, or, as Keyu pointed out, are there political benefits here too?
Yeah, I think there's benefits right across the sort of areas that the two countries have been talking about over the last few days. There's clearly economic benefits for China, for Chinese companies, in being able to explore new markets, in having new opportunities for investment as they develop their global presence. I think there's financial opportunities, as Keyu says, in terms of internationalizing the Chinese currency, the renminbi, and developing China's financial system. But there are also benefits in other areas. And one of the things that I think has had a little bit less comment about President Xi's visit to the UK is that he's visited a couple of research institutes in his time. He went to the National Graphene Research Institute in Manchester and to Imperial College in London. And both of those signify the importance of research and science collaboration in this bilateral relationship at the moment. And I think in these areas, actually, China has a lot to learn and to benefit from the better ties with the United Kingdom. There are other areas too. I think opening up, the UK opening up its visas to Chinese tourists to allow people to come for 2 years rather than 6 months on a multiple entry visa gives an opportunity for people from China to travel more easily and more frequently to the UK. So there's a wide range of benefits across economic, scientific, educational, and person-to-person links.
Victor, looking at what we sometimes call the optics of this visit, one of our analysts said this week that one could see, quote, a visual redefining of the relationship, the very warm, welcoming reception from the Queen, President Xi and the Queen traveling together in the royal carriage, the state banquet at Buckingham Palace. How important is all this pomp and pageantry, and how has it contributed to the success of this visit?
Well, first of all, I would say among all the major countries in the world today, Britain probably has the highest form of bells and whistles, pomp and extravaganza in terms of high-level state visit. But in this particular case, I think Britain really has gone to the hilt in providing the highest standard, the best protocol, and the most magnificent display of British hospitality and pageantry for the Chinese president. I think this is, very much symbolism, but also this bodes very well for the substance of China-British relations. I don't think President Xi Jinping or the Chinese delegation or China as a nation will be swayed purely by the bells and whistles, the extravaganza, etc., if there is no equivalent portion of substance to it. I would say that China and the people here in my country really take great delight in watching the full display of the British hospitality, but in their heart, I think they are very much touched and excited about the way that China and Britain now treat each other as two equals with full respect for each other. And even though there are differences and problems, occasionally ups and downs, etc., between the two countries, both countries refuse to be held hostage by these problems, but they are determined to transcend above these problems and focus on the most important thing, that is how to benefit each other from this great relationship and how to move forward to forge a truly 21st century global partnership in all respects of the world.
Keyu, the United Kingdom broke with its traditional ally, the United States, in joining the AIIB, the Asia Infrastructure and Investment Bank, which is a Chinese-led bank. How important is that? How significant is the fact that the UK joined the bank?
Oh, it's hugely important. It is the first official European country to join the AIIB, and its joining the AIIB had caused an avalanche of other European countries following suit. It is significant because it is almost a vote for confidence in China's commitment to corporate governance, to environmental considerations, to really building a truly state-of-the-art international organization of the new century. It is a vote of confidence, and I think China will remember this. It would be a historical moment.
Right, and Tim, we also saw another area of cooperation, a little bit unexpected. There was an important nuclear agreement that was signed between these two countries. This is how Britain's BBC put it. It said, "It is unimaginable that the United States would consider letting China design, build and operate a nuclear power station on US soil. The United Kingdom will be the first Western government to do so." How important is that?
I think it's an important deal. It's an important, significant amount of investment for a start. I mean, look at this from the UK perspective. The UK is not in as good a state economically as it might have been in the past. I mean, the economy is growing, but the government debt is rising as a proportion of GDP. The UK has always been open to investment and much more open to foreign investment than many other economies around the world. So this is an important and significant deal for the UK. It will provide, we hope, some good long-term sustainable energy resources. I think when it comes to Chinese investment, we've already seen over recent years that the UK takes a different approach from the United States. That became clear a while ago, and this is perhaps the latest example of that. You asked about the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank as well, and I think, clearly again the UK has taken a different approach to this from the United States. But I think the fundamental thing behind these things is that the UK's interests, the UK's approaches are different from those of the US. The US has a position to maintain as a dominant global power. That's part of its objectives. The UK doesn't. The UK is a European power. Whether it's a major power or not, I think is something we could perhaps debate, but it doesn't have the same desire to try and hold on to global leadership. So it doesn't feel threatened by China in the way that many in the United States do. And I think that leads to more openness to engagement with China, whether it's commercial or in other forms. It also leads, I think, the British opinion to be more accepting of a world where power has shifted, where there's a more multipolar distribution of power, where China is relatively more powerful and Western countries are perhaps relatively less powerful than they were in the past.
Victor, what is your view on that the relationship between the United Kingdom and China is very different? It's evolving in a very different way from that between the United States and China.
Definitely. I think there is a big divergence. On the other hand, I think from the Chinese perspective, there is no problem at all if Britain continues to remain one of, if not the closest allies of the United States. China feels comfortable with that. On the other hand, I think the great intensity of goodwill between China and Britain, both in the political area, in the international relations area, in trade, finance, and economic relations as a whole, and also in the great interest of the Chinese students to get their education in the United Kingdom, and the great interest and enthusiasm of Chinese tourists going there for multiple destinations in Britain. I think all this says that China and Britain now can treat each other as equals and can thrive in each other's growth and can also benefit mutually from closer partnership between the two. Now, for China and the United States, I would say for problems mostly in existence in Washington, we have not yet reached that level of mutual trust and mutual comfortableness, partially because I'm afraid Washington has not yet come to the terms that China eventually will be bigger than the United States, not only in terms of the size of the economy, but also probably in terms of global, political, and other influences. There is an unease in Washington about what to do with the Chinese rise, whether to consider that as an adversary or even an enemy, or whether to embrace the rise of China as an opportunity, or whether truly to treat China as an equal partner. But I would say that while Britain now feels comfortable to use the Chinese technologies and total financing package, etc., to build the nuclear power station in Britain, several years ago, this was unimaginable, as it is unimaginable for the United States. But I hope with the momentum of historical growth into the future, the United States eventually, several years later, hopefully, will also do what today is unimaginable, like what Britain has gone through that process. Fundamentally, I would say, the United States need to recognize, as Britain has fully recognized, that China is not a threat to the fundamental interest of either Britain or, in the US case, to the fundamental national interest of the United States. China is here embracing the rest of the world. China is eager to embrace Britain as a partner, and China is equally eager to embrace the United States as an equal partner. But equality between China and the United States is the minimum that China will ask from Washington.